Hello and welcome to the Third Sector podcast. I'm Emily Harle.
And I'm Emily Burt. And in this bonus episode, we'll be reflecting on a recent interview with the new co-chief executives of ActionAid UK. Hannah Bond and Taahra Ghazi were confirmed as the charity's permanent co-chiefs earlier this month. They had both served as part of a 3-person interim leadership team for 2 years following the departure of Halima Begum. Emily, you went to meet Taahra and Hannah recently, and there's already a full write-up of your discussion with them on the Third Sector website. And this co-chief executive model is something we're hearing more and more about at the moment. But that 3-person team, that's rather unusual. How did the co-chiefs find it?
So, as you mentioned, Taahra and Hannah began their co-chief journey at ActionAid nearly 2 years ago as part of a 3-person job share, which is quite unusual. We haven't seen that much in the sector. All 3 interim co-chiefs were already directors of the charity in different departments, roles that they continued to carry out during their interim co-working arrangement. So out of the 2 that have permanently been appointed to the post, Taahra worked at ActionAid since 2000 and her director post was in innovation and impact, while Hannah had been there since 2021 with her director specialty being in advocacy and influencing. So to start with, I asked both Hannah and Taahra about the benefits of working in the job share. Here's what Hannah had to say.
I can probably speak safely for both of us that we really love it. And I think one of the massive benefits is that when something happens, particularly something that's maybe challenging, that you have somebody that you can call up who knows the organisation, who knows the context, who knows you, and you can say, this is what's happened. These are the options of how we could respond. This is what I think we should be doing. And what usually happens is like, yeah, great, go for it. Or are like, but wait a minute, have you thought about this? What about these other elements? What about this side of the picture? Maybe we could use a bit of what you were suggesting and a bit of something else. Or wait, hold up, there's a different way of doing that. And that's incredible because what that we feel very strongly doesn't do is it doesn't lead to indecision. It leads to better decisions. And that's really important because we live in a world that is really, really difficult and really challenging. And we experience that in our daily lives as an organisation, as individuals and as a community. And it's really important to be able to have somebody that you trust and that you can sense check things with so that you are making the best decisions that you can possibly make for the whole organisation and with the partners that we work with, which for us is really key.
And Taahra also agreed. Let's hear what she had to say.
I think on a personal level, having spoken to other single CEOs, that being a CEO has a certain loneliness to it, a certain isolation, a certain, sometimes not understanding you have a lot of power. And with that, really feeling actually sometimes on your own with decision making. And I think that's really difficult because actually, who do you then talk to? Who do you offload to? Because you feel actually, no, that's not something I should do as a human being because, I am here to support others. So I think having to means you can actually be a human being and offload to somebody else. And it's actually important to avoid burnout.
I think what we heard from both Hannah and Taahra there really resonates with the story that we hear all the time from charity chief executives, which is that it can be a really, really lonely job at the top. And having that partner at the top and having that partner in role can be absolutely essential for helping you to kind of do your job well and feeling like you have someone who can share the load with you. Because of course, chief executives, they have their chairs, they have their boards, but often that difference between governance and the executive can be quite challenging, as we know, and they're not actually performing that role with you. And while there are also amazing communities of charity chief executives from a range of different cause areas, you don't necessarily have someone who has that same deep knowledge of the workings of your organisation, of what is happening in your cause area. I think personally that's one of the reasons we're seeing that shift towards more co-leadership models. We've seen a lot of those in recent years. But I do have to say that I do think 3 heads is more unusual for a job share, which I touched on earlier. So I'm kind of wondering practically, how did they divide up the tasks between the 3 of them?
So I asked Hannah and Taahra this because I was also very curious. They both agreed that one of the most important things to do was to split up all of the responsibilities at the beginning. So during their interim arrangement, they largely did this based on skill sets and their director specialties. Both Hannah and Taahra's advice was to sort of sit down together and pick apart the job description and then divvy everything up between you. And then their advice was to take a step back and then think about the responsibilities that might not necessarily appear in that job spec. Think about how you can share those sort of hidden responsibilities, those hidden roles between yourselves so that everyone has an equal workload and is comfortable. Taahra did admit that 3 co-chiefs did create a lot of unexpected additional admin work. So there's more diaries to administer, and finding time to sit down together and then focus on the bigger picture, that strategy work, was quite challenging, she said. And she also talked about the difficulty of juggling co-leadership with their director responsibilities.
The biggest challenge that we faced was managing a department and being a co-CEO. I would not recommend that people try to be a CEO and also be a director of department, because the problem is that being a director of a department is a big requirement in itself, and it means you don't have enough time to give to that. And I think that can be frustrating for other colleagues.
Of course, we know that chief executives are inevitably spinning multiple plates all the time. That's part of that job function. And particularly in those smaller charities, those micro charities where you have tiny, tiny teams, you'll often have a chief executive who is also the lead fundraiser, who is also the head of marketing and the head of digital. It's not at all uncommon. But as Taahra acknowledges, that does create a lot of strain if you're having to have so many different hats on at the same time. So probably helpful to have been able to create more of a distinction between those roles as they go into that permanent positioning. As now permanent co-chiefs, how are they planning to split the role up?
So in their permanent posts, they're actually carrying out the chief executive role and the responsibilities of a chief operating officer. So they're effectively doing 2 roles in one, but it's not those director posts. So they're no longer responsible for managing those departments. They told me the plan is to split up the responsibilities based on their skill sets, much like they did previously. And I imagine that this will be largely informed by their almost 2 years experience of working together. So at least they already know how the other one ticks.
And did they have any advice to charities who are considering making this move to a co-leadership model?
They both agreed it was really important to learn from others in the sector who are doing the same thing. So Hannah said that Greenpeace's co-executive directors had been very generous with their advice. But Hannah also stressed the importance of breaking free from your conception of traditional structures and how an organisation should operate that has been ingrained in us when you're embarking on this co-leadership journey. Let's take a listen.
It's really important to go into this acknowledging that it's a different model to a traditional model and is a more feminist model. And therefore it means working differently, and it means learning differently and sharing responsibility differently. And it's really important to acknowledge that and make that a part of your own thinking, but also your organisational wide thinking.
So that idea of co-leadership being not only an alternative model, but a feminist one, came up again and again throughout the interview, and I thought that was so interesting, particularly for ActionAid, which their work is to support women and girls who are facing poverty, facing crisis. So I asked Hannah what her definition of feminist leadership was.
It's about kind of who you are as a person. And for me, that's really the fundamental part of it, is that you can be a feminist leader in whatever job you're in, whether you are doing activism, whatever job in any sector. And it isn't about necessarily just being the CEO of an organization. We all take on different parts of feminist leadership when we're leading in different areas in any organization. And I think for me, that's what's really key about feminist leadership, is that it's often seen as being the CEO of an organization, but it isn't. It's about how you greet people, how you get up in the morning, what you say to people, kind of trying to think in a way that is outside of the norm that we've all been kind of conditioned to.
I think we're in a really interesting place in the charity sector right now, where there are lots of different movements towards breaking away from those traditional Victorian hierarchical structures of what kind of old school charity was, of giving to the deserving poor, quote unquote, of breaking down colonial funding structures, of handing power back to the hands of the users or creating grassroots community movements. This to me feels as though it is part of that shift towards a more egalitarian sector, and we'll go right back to thinking about the roots of what it is to be charitable and to be running a charitable institution. And I do think it's a very, very interesting take, given that the majority of roles in the sector are held by women, which of course I'm not saying that you have to be a woman to be a feminist, but it's certainly a very interesting sounding model.
I agree, and it was really exciting actually to hear both Hannah and Taahra talking about this idea of feminist leadership being a break from traditional norms, from traditional hierarchical organizational structures. And I thought Taahra actually did sum up really nicely at one point when she said feminist leadership is not about being a woman, it's about sharing power. And that's a lot of what ActionAid is trying to do at the moment. They're putting a lot of concerted effort into making sure that their work is all about sharing the power that they hold as a big major charity. And it's something that was actually central to its recently launched strategy.
So what our strategy really acknowledges is that as a UK-based international NGO, we have significant access to power. Maybe not as much as we'd want, but we have significant relative access to power, whether that be political, financial, all sorts of power. And that it is really important that organisations like ours use the space that we have to influence that, to influence the decisions that power holders make, but also that we open up the space that we have, whether it be small or big, depending on who those power holders are, to support the incredible work that women's rights organisations and feminist movements are doing to also influence those power holders. And I think we feel a really important responsibility as a UK-based organisation to open up that space and use that space maybe initially for us to step into that, and then often to step out of that space where those organisations then take forward the incredible work that they're already doing, but perhaps with new contacts or, new access.
That idea of stepping into the space and then having the sort of self-awareness to step out of it and let those grassroots organisations run with those new contacts, that new power that they have, is something that we're hearing quite a lot about in the sector at the moment, isn't it, Emily?
It absolutely is. And for me, I think the challenge for many organisations is with that idea of stepping in and stepping out. It's all well and good, but how do you do it in a way that sets up your grassroots community, your service user, whoever you are handing the power to? It also gives them the capacity to continue to grow and develop in a way that is sustainable, not just coming in saying, we're giving support, but actually now we're leaving again and you're on your own from here. And that is a very difficult balance to get right. So I'd be interested to hear about, how that's going to play out for ActionAid.
So Hannah and Taahra reeled off a number of incredible initiatives that ActionAid is currently working on as part of their efforts to decolonise their work. As part of its strategy, which we heard Hannah talk about a bit there, the charity has mapped more than 200 grassroots women's rights organisations in 64 countries to better understand what they need from organisations like ActionAid, with the results underpinning a transformation programme that the charity is undertaking, which will run until 2028. This includes a number of tangible actions that Taahra mentioned to me, such as long-term flexible funding through a programme called Transform, and a new fundraising model which is based in collective giving called Sisterhood. But this decolonising work is a massive undertaking and it needs to be internal as well as external. So I asked Taahra where organisations looking to embark on this anti-racism work should start.
What I would suggest is that you start off by having a learning series. Either you may have experts within your organisation or bring in experts to do this work with you. Then look at initiatives that you could do. Look at how you tell your stories. Whose stories are you telling? In whose voice? How are you representing people from other countries and places? Are you accidentally stereotyping whilst you are doing that? Now, so think about everything from the narratives you're telling to really the kind of fundraising you're doing. So a lot of people listening will probably go, oh yeah, but you've got child sponsorship. yes, we do have child sponsorship, and that's another part of our transformation program. So we are in a 3-year program at the moment with 6 other countries in our federation to evolve child sponsorship, looking at this being much more about a solidarity project, a community project. But yeah, it's going to take a bit of time because it's a lot of our income at the moment. It's around 34% across the whole federation.
So that picking apart and really dismantling every aspect of your work as a charity, including your fundraising work, and potentially reimagining models that have been really large parts of your income, like ActionAid is currently in the process of doing. It sounds like a huge undertaking, but that will really allow you to sort of live and breathe that anti-racism work. And I think what Taahra said about reimagining your narratives, thinking about whose voice you are portraying those narratives in, and making sure that you're really living and breathing that is so important.
Absolutely. And as case studies have shown, you cannot simply become anti-racist on a surface level in a matter of weeks. If you are genuinely committed to this journey, then it does mean doing very deep structural work, because you are having to unpack generations of institutional racism, of power being held in the wrong places. And it's a big effort, and it will involve really creative reimagining of these big channels of income.
Absolutely.
And thinking about where that money comes from and how you can generate it in other ways, which I think, again, is why that learning journey, why working with external experts who have feet on the ground is such an important part of it if you're going to do it in a meaningful way.
And Taahra did mention that ActionAid has really invested in this. So they've brought in external experts to carry out this work. And I asked her about how that went.
For other people in the sector listening, we did invest in a decolonisation unit, in a team. There's 3 people. One person works on anti-racist storytelling. The other 2 are working on develop the Transform Fund and specifically worked on the women's rights mapping. Now, without those individuals, who are all absolutely brilliant, we wouldn't have that work. That has come from that innovation and investing in that. And it's really important that we do this, because if we don't invest in that work, it's not going to happen. People don't suddenly wake up one day and become anti-racist. It's a practice. It's something you have to inhabit.
So my talk with Hannah and Taahra gave me a lot of hope and excitement about what's next for ActionAid. And I'm really looking forward to see what happens next with their anti-racism work in particular.
Brilliant. Well, we hope you enjoyed hearing about Emily's interview with Hannah and Taahra, and of course you can read the full write-up of their conversation under the Features tab on the Third Sector website. From all of us at Third Sector, thank you for listening. Our producers are Jude Owen and Nav Powell.